Welcome everybody to Friday, March 8th, 2024 Housing Advisory Committee for Bowen Island Municipal Council. I'll call the meeting to order. Does anybody have, or approval of the agenda? So does anybody have any comments, questions, additions to the agenda?
I don't, but you mentioned you might.
Yes, yeah, there's one item. Nigel's going to mention something quickly. I thought we'll just add that in after public comments. So I don't know exactly number-wise if it'll be 4.1 or we fit it in there somewhere, but I thought we'll just let Nigel, he just has something he needed to speak to. Is everybody okay with that, or any other comments or changes?
Is it new business? And so it should go under new business.
I think I'd prefer it to go at the beginning. We can even consider it a public comment. I'm not sure if that's allowed for committee members, but I think it would fit better at the beginning, and we'll just do that. Okay, so hearing none, no objections, we'll pass that unanimously with no objections. Adoption of the minutes. They looked okay to me, but I would appreciate if somebody could comment. There was the section that I was recused for, so if anybody can just kind of give it the thumbs up that that all does look like an accurate reflection of what was discussed and decided.
Yeah.
It's okay to me.
Yeah. Okay, great. So motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Yep, thank you. Second, Nigel, everybody approved? Yep, okay, approved. Thank you. So public comments, Steph, are there any public comments?
No.
No? Okay, great. So we'll hand it over to Nigel and then we'll move on to the council referral. Take it away, Nigel.
Okay, so I attended the short-term rental open house that staff put on. It was fantastic. And I got some feedback just about me at that meeting. I made a point of introducing myself to people that I was speaking with in the room as having a unique perspective, both as somebody who manages a handful of short-term rentals on Bowen, but also as a member of the Housing Advisory Committee, which I thought covered my disclosures, but I was reminded that actually there's an important nuance that I should have expressed, which was I was there speaking as a member of the public and not on behalf of the Housing Advisory Committee. And that nuance is really important, and I understand it better now. And I just wanted to apologize on record, and I'll be extra diligent about that. That was all.
That's great. Thanks, Nigel. And I think it's good. It's an important reminder for all of us because I know it does come up, and also we do get new committee members on and we might not remember to cover it again. But yeah, it's certainly, we're all involved in housing. We're interested in it. So obviously we're going to talk about it. We're going to go to events. We're involved in other things. So, you know, like last meeting, I had to recuse myself because I was involved in something. And so it's going to come up and it's going to happen. So I think thanks, Nigel. And it's just a great reminder. So, you know, if you are at things speaking about housing, or if you're in email communications or anything, just be extra diligent and careful. It doesn't hurt to just be really clear that you, although you're a member of the committee, you're speaking personally, whether that's in public or not. And then same thing to recuse yourself if there is a conflict of interest, or even just to declare the conflict of interest if you're you know certain you won't be biased. But I think it's always just safer to declare anything just so it's all transparent. And if you do have any questions about it, contact staff, contact me if you want to discuss it or if you have any clarification. And I think staff in the works might be sort of a like a one-pager to kind of cover some of these as well, just to clarify for committee members. So yeah, we'll look forward to getting that. So we'll move along. 4.1, council referrals. So I think, is it Drew? You're going to lead us today? Yep, great. Take it away.
Thanks so much. Share my screen here, 1 second. Oh my God. Sorry guys, I'm just not seeing that share screen button. I don't know why I've done this many times. What's going on?
Hopefully it's bright green at the bottom, kind of center,
oh, there,
slightly left. Yeah, got it.
No kidding. Sorry about that.
I think it was the AI companion that threw you off. That's what it was.
There you go. Yeah, I'll blame the AI. Okay, so everyone's at the right slide page there. Is it on? Oh.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we see it, but not full screen.
Is that? Oh, bizarre.
There you go.
Okay, good. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so thanks, everyone. So the purpose of this presentation is to introduce the changes to the land use bylaw that are required through Bill 44 as the province takes measures to increase housing availability and affordability in BC. So this bill, which is referred to as the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act 2023, is intended to end single-family zoning in the province for communities of a certain size and also introduces changes applicable to all communities. One change required by June 30th, 2024 that we'll be discussing is that all local governments must amend their bylaws to allow either a secondary suite or a detached secondary suite on any residential zone lot. So currently on Bowen, most residential zones already have that permission, but there are listed zones and sub-areas of those zones that don't allow suites. Those are the zones that must be amended to allow secondary suites by June 30th, 2024, as per the province's requirement. And I get that laying them out like this, it kind of looks like the majority don't allow suites, but if you kind of to look at kind of a different way of looking at it, where those are covering, the majority of the island is under the SR settlement residential or RR rural residential zoning. It's largely the comprehensive development zones, which are typically subdivision specific zones that'll be affected, and even then those zones are typically divided into sub areas, so it'll be some of those areas will need amendments, some won't. Just to back up to those other changes. Sorry.
Can we ask questions as we go along? Or do you want us to wait to the end?
Probably at the end would be best. I
Okay.
might skip around a little bit, but
That's okay. I'll just make a note.
okay. Okay. So just to touch on some of the other changes coming through the pipeline. Again, these are ones applicable to all communities, and so applicable to Bowen. So there'll be changes, including that housing needs reports will have to identify 20 years of housing needs rather than 5 years as currently. Official community plans must be updated every 5 years and plan for 20 years of growth. Public hearings will be phased out for housing projects that are already consistent with the official community plan. Just to touch briefly on changes, the changes that are applicable to communities of minimum size. So again, won't go a whole lot of these, not the main point of what we're discussing today, since it's again not applicable to Bowen. But just to be clear, could be to some degree someday. So it's changes that are applicable to communities within an urban containment boundary. If they're not within that, then it's communities that hit a population of 5,000 people. Even if Bowen does eventually hit 5,000 people, there are other exemptions applied that essentially it'll only, so yeah, once we do hit that population, it'll still be that it only applies to properties on community water or community sewer. But anyways, to touch on those changes, it's essentially that, so currently your average single family zoned lot in Vancouver will typically allow a single family dwelling and a secondary suite. So now it's looking at adding an additional suite on properties smaller than 280 square meters, a fourth unit on properties larger than that, looking at even larger 6 units plus on looking at transit-oriented areas, TUAs, areas within a vicinity of transit stops. So basically all this being the intent of adding more units out there, increasing availability, and then also divvying up the cost of land between multiple units, which is the best way of addressing affordability or one way of addressing affordability out here on the West Coast, where land is so expensive. And just to briefly touch on that concept of missing middle housing forms, which is a large part of what the province is intending to address. And again, just to kind of touch on this, because again, we're just dealing with the secondary suite changes at the moment here on Bowen, but just really worth noting that important point that 70 to 80% of all residential zone land in North America is specifically zoned single family residential. But when we look at the breakdown of households, it's 85% of households have no kids, 33% are just one person. So such a big issue facing us is that the majority of housing stock out there and the majority being built is not suited in terms of size and affordability for the demographics need it the most. So just one optional thing to talk about, or an optional amendment. So this is not something required under the province's changes, but it'd be a prudent to address it at this time. It's the size of secondary suites. So currently the land use bylaw on Bowen Island requires a 90 square meter maximum size of a secondary suite. So keep in mind, we're talking about just the attached secondary suite part of the principal dwelling. We're not talking about the detached secondary suites, which have a different size limit. But yeah, so this 90 square meters, that was specifically based on just metering the requirement under the BC building code, but that maximum has since been removed. So essentially the only maximum facing right now is under our municipal bylaw. So by all means, we have the option of, if we're looking right now and talking about options for increasing housing options, we could increase that maximum size or just get rid of it completely. So anyways, yeah, we'd love to hear any discussion points the committee has on those changes required to allow secondary suites, and if you guys have opinions on the sizes of suites.
Great, thank you, Drew. Allison, did you want to go ahead? You had a question?
Well, just a curiosity question. it said in residential zones. Most of our zoning allows residential. Maybe just one of the industrials might not, but so what does the province consider?
It would be zones that allow a dwelling or duplex use or anything like that. We have to add suites.
Yeah, but every one of I thought every one of our zones allows commercial allows mixed use and stuff like that. So I was wondering,
It's
if it was just the ones where we have, family homes and nothing, but is it primary use to be residential that they consider residential, or are we going to have to rezone every section?
Allison, it's when a residential use is permitted. So it says in respect of which the permitted residential use would be restricted to a detached single family dwelling.
Okay, so then thinking of zoning we put in for Function Junction, lot one, would that then have to be?
I don't think so because it allows multifamily.
Already? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It was a curiosity question. So
Yeah.
that is defined somewhere in the regs or the bill. I didn't see that. I'll
Yeah.
have a look. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Good. No, that was a good clarifying question. And I do remember from some of the referrals we looked at, maybe even last year, and as Drew said in that map, it was quite clear there's, I feel like it's evergreen or some of the areas around that, and some of the comprehensive ones where at the time the zoning restricted suites for whatever the reasons were at the time. So I think those are the ones that are going to be most impacted. So does any other, and sorry, I can't see everybody. Maybe we'll stop sharing screen just for now while we discuss, and we can always maybe Drew bring stuff up if we need to, then I can sort of see these spaces. There we go. Yes, Lois, please go ahead.
Just a question. I may have not fully understood, but how does it apply for increasing amounts on where there's a septic? Because that's always been a restriction. Can you comment on that?
So any areas that have covenants related to restricting number of units based on water or sewer or just any covenants at all will supersede zoning. So even if we're essentially required to make that change across the board to make the change to all zones, but in those zones that have those protections, or I guess I should say on those lots that have protections where they've got a covenant on for water or sewer reasons, that would supersede our zoning. So in those cases where that's the concern, these changes won't supersede that, won't be creating an issue in that regard.
And I'll just add to that, just to say, to get a building permit, you'll need to show that you have a septic field design that can handle the flows and is approved by coastal health, so that it's possible that some of these zones, or potentially possible, we don't know for sure, but there's a house on a lot that's mostly cliff. The zoning may say now you can have a secondary suite, but functionally they can't, or like economically they can't construct a septic field, and so they wouldn't actually be able to build it, but the zoning would permit it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lois. Good question. Nigel, your hand was up next. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question that I think for the planning department. Conceptually, I like the idea of allowing people to build more space just to address housing needs, but I'm kind of wondering what the rationale is for putting limits on it, just so I can understand kind of like the floor and the ceiling of concern.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Nigel.
Well, one of the questions that we're being asked as the Housing Advisory Committee is to weigh in on the square footage restrictions of secondary suites, and I like the idea of having either raising the limit or not having one. But before commenting on that, I just wondered if the planning department might offer some context on why we would consider putting limits on it. It's not obvious to me.
I think I think it's to some degree arbitrary. I guess it's sort of separating, I guess, from duplex use, or just kind of identifying what's the primary unit versus the secondary unit. But Yeah, that's what the best. Yeah, I don't know if Daniel can think of anything else. I mean, I don't think there's anything super crucial as to what sets that limit.
I mean, I would say, yeah, so initially, like in BC, the building code restricted secondary suites to a maximum 90 square meters. And so that essentially lets you build it as a secondary suite in the building code, which lets you have like lesser separations and everything. And as a result, almost every municipality in BC had that 90 square meter maximum size for a secondary suite. It was just kind of like a default that everyone had. And then it was I believe it was the 2018 code update. They removed that restriction. So some places allow it to be bigger. I think the concerns like conceptually going back to when secondary suites were first being permitted, the idea is that they're sort of that secondary unit on a property. And so seen as advantageous to like concerns around neighborhood character, that the buildings still appear as a, you know, a single family dwelling with a secondary space within it rather than as a duplex type unit.
Okay.
So conceptually, like if there was no limit to secondary suite size, somebody could build on Bowen quite legitimately something that looked like a duplex, that looked like, you know, two buildings connected by a corridor or something. So like if you were in a 10-acre rural residential lot, you could do that quite easily, and you could have something that looks like this. And so, you know, maybe that's a concern people have, is sort of like the aesthetic of development on Bowen, or maybe it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Allison, go ahead.
I was trying to remember back to when we did that. Now I've lost track of what my original question was going to be. Okay, I remember. So to get the building permit, you also are going to have to prove water, right? So yes, you might be able to, under the zoning, build it, but under getting a building permit, if you haven't got adequate septic or adequate water, you're not going to get it built. The housing, there's a lot of place stratas around where they don't allow anything more than one dwelling per property. And I know John O'Donnell mentioned there's out in Arbutus Ridge, or Arbutus Road, there's a covenant on all those properties that there will only be one. And at the housing seminar, I happened to be sitting with Don Lidstone over lunch, and I asked the question, and the covenants restricting the use of not having the second suite or the second dwelling are still valid. But as a muni, we don't pay any attention to the covenants, correct? So we don't enforce those. The strata is going to have to enforce those, or the neighbors are going to have to enforce those.
I mean, it'll depend on the nature of it. Like we hold some covenants that restrict secondary suite use. So there's some subdivisions where either like, you know, water concerns or total septic concerns, or like road access, fire access concerns, you know, we limited it. We said, okay, this subdivision is suitable for 4 units. And so they've decided we want them for, you know, single family homes with 4 units, and we have a covenant on them.
So if BIM holds the covenant, then they won't get the building permit even past the front door. But if the strata holds the covenant, BIM could issue the building permit, and the strata would have to enforce so I don't quite know how we deal with that from a practical perspective, but
I mean, practically, I'll say like currently we will alert applicants of restrictions that other people hold, and we will seek, you know, to get the necessary approvals as sort of part of our review process. But ultimately, we would not or could not deny a permit based on a third party restriction.
Covenant, and I guess the other was just talking about the size. It's the definition of accessory. It's got to be smaller in size than the main dwelling. So your duplex, I don't think one side would have to be smaller than the other, just because of the definition of accessory use.
I could design you a building, Allison, that's one side is 1,800 square feet and one side is 1,798, and one would be smaller.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
There's ways around it. Yeah. So,
it's very, but you know, just sort of primary and substantial.
Exactly. And it's that concept. And I appreciated Daniel's definite response and Nigel's question, because exactly that's historically what it was. It was meant to be a smaller secondary thing that again was not generally not like visible, right? It was meant to be a basement suite. It was meant to be something really secondary. And that's really evolving and changing, right? And now we have detached secondary suites and all of that's yeah, it's really changing. And now these are, I think it's safe to say, very broad sweeping changes by the province. And so, you know, and we're having to respond. So I just wanted to put it out there. We haven't heard much from Greg or Tim, and I'll just open it in a second if either of you want to comment. But I certainly, my initial reaction is to just remove the limit, like in terms of space, just to remove the limit. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't really see a function for having that limit, unless the only one might be to align it in some way with the detached secondary suite. But again, I have to think about that and maybe look at it more, because I know we do have limits on detached secondary suites. And I can't remember exactly what those are, but something like 1,200 square feet to 1,500 square feet-ish, I think, depending on the lot size. So if we were to do something, maybe that would make sense, that maybe we just align the limit of secondary suites attached or detached with that, if somebody did want to. But yeah, my instinct would be just to remove that limit, again, in the spirit of this is where we're heading with housing, that, you know, other communities are basically allowing duplexes, if not, what was it, Drew, three units, I think, basically everywhere, right? Yeah. That single families were allowed. And then if Bowen tips, I'm sorry, maybe Drew, my one question would be, if Bowen tips over the 5,000, was it that we would have to rezone, but only if they were on community water and sewer? Like it had to be on both. Okay, so a lot of Bowen that would not apply to, right? So yeah, it's an interesting thought to see if we would just kind of move along with that in line with these provincial ones, or if we, yeah, think that maybe it's better to keep a restriction. Anyways, I'll stop babbling on. Greg, Tim, did either of you have some thoughts you wanted to share, or any comments?
Can I clarify that this is only if and when we get to a population of 5,000, or
there's two different tests, two different programs.
Okay.
So yeah,
just to confirm that the secondary suites applies to us now, applies to all local governments, and the multiple units on a lot applies if we become over 5,000.
And I think we've got enough controls in there, and I think what we do want to be doing is encouraging as much housing as we can get and removing obstacles. So I don't see the need for the limits.
Okay,
and
so
I
we
really
had two. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Alison.
I was going to say, I like removing the limit, because if you think about it right now, a lot of families are sharing a house, and if they've got, you know, you want to be able to have the secondary suite big enough to accommodate the family.
Yeah.
That's going to be sharing it. Yeah. And not, you know, squeeze somebody into something that, you know, is very uncomfortable.
And it's an interesting thing. So the only thing that I'm thinking about now is the ramifications of this. If this went through, if you had a large piece of land, you could build a detached secondary suite, and you would have a limit on how big that could be. Then you could have an attached, as Daniel sort of said, with whatever the requirements are for it to be attached, a garage or a storage room or something like that. Yeah. Breezeway, I don't, you can't remember if breezeways count these days or not, but you could have a seemingly unlimited size. So I think if we do, as a committee, agree to remove any kind of limit, we would likely want to address detached secondary suites as well, because it to me doesn't really make sense if you are not limiting attached and you are limiting detached. But maybe it does. Again, they're different buildings. Or maybe, I don't know, Drew, Daniel, is it possible to, and this obviously couldn't be answered today, there would be more needed. Is it possible to put additional restrictions in terms of it has to be integrated into one form that would, you know, still appear as one house? I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not saying necessarily this is how I would go, but I'm trying to think, especially as an architect, how would this be used? If this passed and somebody's designing, like I say, they could design an unlimited size other than what the zoning restricts in terms of square footage, if it's attached, whereas they're the lot coverage and the height, right? Whereas if it's detached, they are limited. So as you say, Alison, there's a family, they buy a, you know, property or renovate a property, they'd actually be restricted by the detached and not the attached. So I think that's worthy of some consideration, and maybe we don't have the answer today. But I think that's definitely something to be thought through. Yeah. So I guess, Drew, oh, go ahead, Allison, then I'll go back to.
Can you refresh my memory on what the maximum size is for a detached?
It's up to 140 square meters, which is like 1,500 square feet.
Yeah. And I think that's the maximum, like it's on a larger lot. I think it's scaled to smaller lots.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So I think that, yeah, Lois, please.
Just a thought on, I don't know what the restrictions are, but is there any benefit to having some kind of restriction in terms of it makes it more affordable? Like, you know, the smaller it is, the more affordable it's going to be. Not that it has to be 500 square feet, but if it could, I'm just thinking that we're increasing housing and therefore should be increasing affordability. But if it's too big, it's going to be more costly, and then that limits who can live there.
Yeah, I don't know,
But
Drew,
500
Daniel,
square feet for a family.
No, I'm not suggesting 500 square feet.
No, I know, but that's
the. If it's unlimited, how big can that go? And if it's very expensive, it's more to build, and then that cost gets passed on.
Well, what I think of from that, Lois, is there anything that we would want to consider putting in that would incentivize people to build something that was more affordable, right? Anyway, maybe I'll go to Daniel or Drew if you had any thoughts about that.
I mean, like we could zone for like density benefits, right? So it's potential to have a zoning bylaw that says you can build up to 90 square meters. Normally, that's your normal threshold, or you can build up to whatever, 200 square meters attached secondary suite, provided you enter into a housing agreement and you agree to, you know, cap the rent or something. So that's like possible. That's a tool that could be used. It tends to be when people do reviews of local governments that have that, it's quite challenging to make the incentives worth it. And that what you find then is people just don't do the incentives. They just say, okay, I can do 90 square, I'll just do what I'm allowed to do and not have to then enter into an agreement and be monitored and like all the pieces that come with it. They would rather just build what they're allowed outright.
So I guess the other question is, what's the definition of missing middle? I mean, is this trying to help fill in that missing middle? And the missing middle, if I'm understanding, is more accommodation for families.
Yeah, I was more bringing that up in regard to, the missing middle stuff is more about the changes that the province has in terms of the multiple units being allowed on properties. I don't really see that the missing middle is being addressed here on Bowen. Just again, we're just talking about the secondary suite changes right now. But yeah, I did want to bring that up because I see that as being kind of the main intent of the bill in terms of where it's applying elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up this discussion. Oh, okay, Allison, one last question, and then Tim, and then I'm gonna wrap it up.
I guess if our house, you know, what kind of housing do we want to encourage to meet the needs that came out in the housing needs report? And the implications limiting size would have on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Or as sort of Daniel said, maybe there's a way to look at it in terms of incentivizing. You can build more if you build a 3-bedroom family unit or something like that. That's going to be rental or something like, maybe it's not even an affordable covenant because that is pretty restrictive on an owner, but maybe it's a rental thing. I'm not sure. That's a bit of a tricky one. Tim, go ahead.
Well, I think this gets to the perennial problem, which is increasing these days, in that any incentive on the market housing to make it more affordable doesn't really work, and even for the missing middle. So what's missing here is a real push for getting non-market housing and incentives to make housing non-market. And I don't have any ideas how we do that, but I think the province doesn't seem to be recognized. Well, I'm hearing some of it in some of the language more recently that that non-market housing really needs to be a larger percentage, a larger segment of our housing stock.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Nigel, last comment, and then we'll wrap this up.
I know. and I'm sorry, I just wanted to throw out the idea that we might, as a municipality, consider some sort of contribution to the housing fund in exchange for being able to go above the standard density. I think it gets pretty complicated when we get into sort of forcing people to have a non-market rental in a home that they might continue to occupy themselves and leaving that for sort of the next owner whenever they decide to sell. But if that extra density, it has a value to the landowner. And I think that it's the wisest way to capitalize on that is say, yes, you can build extra. You're going to put this percentage of we'll say the fair market value of the finished product into the housing fund, and then we go and do great things with it.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. I think that's a great point, and I appreciate Tim and Nigel's comments. And yeah, I think it is very tricky to try and incentivize owners to somehow create affordability. I think it really is down to nonprofits. So to go back around to what we Drew is looking for our feedback, which is changes to the land use bylaw to go into accordance with the provincial bill. I didn't hear any negative comments. I mean, I think it sounds like we would be in favor of making those changes. And I think we all was made clear the sewer and water needs would still have to be proved. So that's still there. And that if there are overriding covenants, that those still apply if they've been on there. So I don't see any restrictions there. And then the maximum secondary suite size, I think we've had a good discussion. I think in general, people were in favor of lifting them. And I don't know, Drew, Daniel, if you want us to be very specific or if we can simply just give you some comments and that's something that you can take as feedback. But I would say the comments were either to remove it entirely or, to my point, maybe as a starting point, they're in line with the detached secondary suite limitations. And then further thought and research and possibly even engagement might need to be done to remove them entirely. Again, because I just think then you're going to get this weird disparity of attached versus detached. So that would be, I think, my thoughts. And yeah, and I think there were some interesting ideas. I really actually kind of like Nigel's idea, but I think it would just need more thought and review of if there is some sort of limit, whatever that limit is, that if you want to build bigger, it's an option and you can contribute to a housing fund, which would, to Allison's point, actually then contribute to something getting built that the community needs, that the housing needs have identified and actually get something built. So I think that might be something interesting to consider in your review. Okay, so Steph, I might go to you. Do we need an actual written thing or a comment?
We need an actual written thing. Or Drew would need an actual written thing for his report. Drew, correct? Okay. We better. I don't know if I've lost confidence in this part of my job recently.
Oh, that's okay. We will guide you through it.
So I just
scribe.
Can you see it?
Not yet. It's just loading. Yep, there we go. Okay.
So I just have a preamble about what's happening, and then I've got just that you are going to support staff's suggestion for the changes to.
Yeah. Supports just a change regarding changes to the current land use bylaw to accommodate or to bring into line where to, I can't think of the words, Drew, to come into alignment with the provincial regulations, something along. Feel free to wordsmith, anybody want to jump in, but or meet the provincial regulations, whatever that is. So I think that first point on I'm looking at the agenda here. So changes to the land use bylaw to come into accordance with the provincial bill 44. I think we're in agreement with that.
Okay.
And then the maximum secondary suite size. I didn't really put it out there. Does anybody feel strongly one way or the other that it should be either, I think we were all in favor of, so maybe we'll say we're in favor of removing the 90 square meter limit. I think that was safe to say. Everybody, that was pretty unanimous.
Talk about affordability though, wasn't that was.
I think that was just discussion. Yeah, I think in terms of the conclusion, I think it's that we were in favor of removing in favor of removing the 90 square meter restriction, not that a maximum secondary suite be removed. I think we were in favor of the 90 square meter restriction being removed, and that maybe we recommend staff review whether an unlimited size or a size in alignment with the detached secondary suite would best serve.
Oh, cool. Can you say that again?
Maybe, okay, I'm wordsmithing here. That
Yep.
the HAC supports removing the 90 square meter restriction for secondary suites.
Yep, I'd be okay with that. Supports removing.
Well, because that's what the recommend. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Restrictions.
And then and at
there's a 90 square meter restriction. All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then something more along the lines of that the should there be a limit, the secondary suite limit shouldn't be any smaller than the detached. I think
that's the detached secondary suite.
No, the attached secondary suite limit shouldn't be any smaller than the detached.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a good way to go.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think you can delete the next line. Just delete that. And then committee, do we want to include a line about, you know, give consideration to, you know, incentives for larger sizes or something along those lines? I don't know how to word that exactly, that, you know. Drew, Daniel, is there anything in there that you think would be helpful for your report going forward? No? None?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Incentives be considered. I guess not so much incentives, like we're not trying to encourage people to build bigger, but it's like that that consider like amenity contract. No, like,
well, is it like you want to use the word affordability in there? Like, isn't that?
Well, we can't do amenity contributions anymore because they've removed that.
But we can do density benefits. It's in the zoning. It's like density bonus.
Okay. So maybe that's something. So maybe it's that, what was the word? Density bonusing? Yeah, that density.
Yeah, it's not incentives.
Yeah. So start over step. Yeah, that density bonusing could be considered for applications with suites larger than any set limit, something along those lines.
With what?
Yeah, then then the set limit, because we don't know what that is yet. The set limit. I'll just write this. We can wordsmith in a minute. Colon with contributions going to the Housing Reserve Fund.
So is that kind of density bonusing allowed, Daniel?
Yeah.
So they can buy density.
It's section 482 of the Local Government Act.
Okay.
You can establish different density rules under conditions. They can be provision of affordable and special needs housing.
Okay, so it's not a is a contribution to the housing fund considered affordable and special needs housing? Or is it the provision of the unit?
What's that?
Because everywhere I've been seeing it in, like when they're doing the apartments in North Van or something, they get an extra floor if they have the, you know, equivalent units that would be on that floor are affordable.
Right. We'll double check, but that's my understanding is that that could work.
Okay, so if we're okay with how it's written, I'm just going over that last paragraph there.
We received the referral and discussed the referral from council in the I hate whereases.
I know. I don't know why I'm doing this. Sorry.
Do we need the whereas?
No, we don't. But can I do this offline? Just this part? Yeah. And we'll just
of course, do the preamble.
I'll send it around.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Are we good with this part? Just the
yeah, I'll just read out the last part and I'll just say it out loud, and then I think that'll hopefully clear that the Housing Advisory Committee support the changes suggested by staff regarding changes to the current land use bylaw to come into alignment with provincial regulations. It's a little wordy, but I think the gist of it's there. That the Housing Advisory Committee support removing the 90 square meter secondary suite size restriction, and should there be a limit, that the attached secondary suite limit not be any smaller than the detached secondary suite size, and that density bonusing be considered for applications for suites larger than the set limit, with contributions going to the Housing Reserve Fund. Yeah, I think that gets the gist of it. So yeah, Steph, if you want to wordsmith that a bit offline, and we can circulate it by email if that works. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Let's move along. Unless I'll just give Drew or vote. Oh, we need to vote. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
All those in favor.
All those in favor. Let's just go straight to it. Let's see. Okay, great. Let's done. Okay. So any just final, Drew, Daniel, just a final chance. Does that cover everything you need? Is there any final thoughts or anything you need from us on that? It's all good.
No, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Drew.
Okay. So going along to 5.1, the cluster housing zoning work. Oh, this is a ratification by email, right, Steph? So this is something we circulated by email. I think pretty much everybody responded. So what do you need from us? Is it just literally a motion and a vote? Is that okay? So I will move the recommendation that was circulated by email. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
Move the ratification. There's a line in the recommendation that the Housing Advisory Committee ratify the following email recommendation.
Okay, do I have to say that out loud?
No, but we're not just doing the motion that was sent around, we're ratifying the motion.
Okay, so that the Housing Advisory Committee ratify the following recommendation that was sent around by email. So first, or somebody moved it. I think we had Nigel second, and Greg, thank you. All in favor? Thank you.
And so just
passed unanimously
for all of the thousands of viewers there, it's regarding the cluster zoning housing pilot project that council.
Do you want me to read it out? Is that kind of a good thing? So it's in the record? Yeah, okay. It's a bit wordy, this one. That the Housing Advisory Committee ratified the following email recommendation. Whereas on December 11th, 2023, Council received a recommendation regarding cluster housing zoning pilot project from the Housing Advisory Committee, and at that time directed the Housing Advisory Committee to create a work plan and timeline for such. And whereas on January 8th, 2024, Council adopted a terms of reference to support creation of a revised official community plan. And whereas developing a cluster housing zoning pilot project that would require amendments to the official community plan to proceed would be duplicating work being done through the OCP review process. Therefore, be it resolved that the Housing Advisory Committee recommend that Council redirect the HAC from work on a cluster housing zoning pilot project to work on a cluster housing zoning, which will occur in conjunction with and in support of the OCP review and development. Okay, so great. And then we have that on our work plan, which I think is up next anyways, that'll be kind of later in the year as the OCP process kind of starts to get mapped out. We'll obviously be in communication with the planning department in that process and see where we fit in on that. Okay, so leave it open for a moment and then I'll move on to 5.2, hearing none. Okay. 5.2, Housing Advisory Committee Work Plan. So Steph, I don't know if you have that you want to share, or it's in the agenda package. Let me just see. And the recommendation. Amended. Okay, so we're just basically finalizing anything else in the work plan, and then we will do a recommendation that council approve our work plan. That's the goal of this segment here. So Steph, you're okay to share?
Yeah, my computer's so slow this morning. It's
okay.
Trying to open.
Okay. So if you do have your agenda open, you can look on page 10 of the PDF. So we had spring of 2024, looking at a cash and lieu policy and formula, which we have some good work on based on a rezoning thing that happened last year. And also in spring of 2024, reviewing the affordable housing policy, which I think will be really valuable. And then sort of later mid-year, 2024, the land use bylaw review, which Fritz and I have kind of been working on for a while. So it'd be nice. And again, keep an eye on the OCP process and maybe how that might work with that. OCP review, which is going to be in the works. So we'll, sorry, I'm partway down the page here now. Yeah, so the third from the bottom there, OCP review. I think again that's just going to have to be. We'll refine that through the year and see from the OCP review committee what feedback they might want from us and what that might look like. We certainly have. I think there's already been some work done. I know Fritz has done some notes and everything, so maybe it's just simply we kind of clarify that and clean it up, and we can even send that to the committee just with our thoughts. Or I think we can wait and see how that that back and forth works. The next one later in the year, cluster zoning. Okay, so that's kind of the same thing as we mentioned, part of the OCP review and feedback we can give to that committee on that zoning. And then I have early summer 2024 workforce housing, so a joint meeting with the CEDC. So I actually am planned to attend the next CEDC meeting, which I think is next week now, or in a couple, I can't remember. It's in my calendar, sometime in the next week or two. There we go. So I'm actually going to attend that, and I think probably speak very briefly to kind of what we've been doing a little bit, and then just sit and have a bit of discussion with them, or certainly listen to what their work they're doing on workforce housing, just to make sure we keep those lines of communication open. And then I think on the second page is just sort of items that are on our radar. And I know that this isn't necessarily like developing a housing policy. I don't think that's necessarily something we as the Housing Advisory Committee would do, but I think it's something we can support and maybe figure out how to move that forward, because that's quite a big chunk of work to develop a housing policy, but it's just something I think we want to have on our radar and see if we can move that forward by the end of the year. Although with the OCP review happening, that might have to wait till the following year. That might be a little bit of a chunk of work. And the second one on our radar is some proactive rezoning and density bonusing that may relate to the Housing Accelerator Fund, which I think, well, I'll ask Daniel in a minute if that's been announced. I think there was an announcement on that this week. And then the last one, Housing Reserve Fund. I think that's been on our list for a while, just to keep, I think basically just to keep open and constantly be looking for ways that the Housing Reserve can be funded. Great.
Sorry,
and then
Robin, the develop housing policy, is it not then hold a session? We'll just say ongoing.
I'll hold a brainstorm session, create an outline. I don't, yeah.
It's fine. I just wanted to make sure I captured your comments.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if anybody else in the group has sort of a better comment on that. I'm not quite, I haven't, oh yeah,
I'm
Alison,
curious. I had two questions, and that was one of them. What if we're doing an OCP? Doesn't the OCP going to set out our housing policy? Like we've got the housing needs assessment, and that's going to have to be incorporated into the OCP. So I'm just a little confused as to what a housing policy would be.
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe, I don't know, Daniel, if you have any clarity. I just know other communities have housing policies, and we have an affordable housing policy. So I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't something we need, Daniel. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I know. I guess it's like, well, it depends. Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's like hopefully the OCP will have updated housing policies within it. Whether or not, but so maybe it would be something that would flow from an OCP if it's saying like there needs more detailed work on this particular thing.
I think I know
like
idea.
Our last OCP had has some policies in it that sort of speak to you know, in the right circumstance, you'll consider this. And then you want that a policy that actually spells out and says, okay, the OCP policy 350 says, you know, we want to consider these things, and let's do some more detailed work on what those things actually mean.
So is it really a housing policy, or it's more specific to different types of housing, or what the OCP is going to identify as being needed? Then the next step would be developing a policy to get it.
So maybe the right thing in that section where you had it, Steph, is maybe just to sort of, review the updated OCP and see if there's any recommendations to move forward with a separate housing policy or other document. Once the OCP has been done, let's have a look at it, see if we'd recommend any further action, or like say maybe the OCP is taking care of it. So yeah, I think rather than be very specific about developing a housing policy, maybe it's just a
so we move the first sentence about a brainstorming session.
I think so. Yeah, at this point, I think
leave. Yeah. Oh, your review was what should have been in there. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so that would be towards the end of the year. Maybe it's even carried over to the following year.
So rather than say develop, put in the word consider.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be okay with that. Consider a housing policy. Yeah. Okay.
And then the very first one, the first work plan item.
Sorry, Tim, are you down on this one still?
Yeah, just an example of something we could put into a housing policy is we keep talking about encouraging offsite and modular construction, which would really be a help in terms of keeping our housing getting delivered and keeping it more affordable. So I think
along those lines, we've got a top coming to council on Monday night for exactly that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think, Steph, we have to word that out.
No,
I think
that's not going to go in there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it has to go in that little thing, but Tim, it's a good point. Like those are, and it's an example of something that wouldn't be necessarily in an OCP, but might be something you take the lines that, you know, the policies from the OCP and then expand on them a little bit, giving examples or something like that. I think that's a great way to think about what that might look like. Allison, go ahead. You had a comment on the first?
So it's the little bit in brackets under the work plan element that I'm on the first one. I don't understand. It says pre-zone legislation problems, and then DM, which I assume is Daniel Martin.
Probably is what that means.
Well, no. But what is DM would have?
Oh, sorry, Daniel.
Perfect OCP.
So Daniel was saying if it's in the OCP, it's fine. Or if something doesn't align with the OCP, then you're going to get the wasn't it that?
Yeah, I mean that little, it's not making sense, and you can't say the new perfect OCP. That's
note for myself. Sorry.
Yeah, good catch, Allison. Thank you. So yeah, we can just delete that, and I guess maybe the next one, just in tidying this up, to be added the affordable housing policy. So maybe instead of that first sentence with the question mark at the end, we could say, you know, with reference to a recent, contribution for a rezoning process, something like that.
After policy or guideline here.
I'm just thinking, do we need to mention the first line, like our Arbutus Bay specifically? I think we could just say, based on, the recent formula for rezoning, we could develop a new one. Yeah.
Based on formula for a recent rezoning.
Yeah, rezoning. Something along those lines, yeah.
And take out recent in the first line.
Yeah. Based on formula for recent rezoning, support staff in making this a policy or guideline. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thanks, Steph. Okay, anybody catch any other sort of wordsmithing or things we should tidy up before this gets approved?
I don't know why it's got double blue lines under review process for the. It would be really nice, and I'm sorry to be a pain, if there was another column that numbered these and lettered them A, B, C, D, because then I could say box D or box C.
Okay.
If you're wanting to ask a question.
Yeah, you can do that offline, Steph, for sure.
Okay, and what about the status? Do you want to put in status here for the OCD among us?
I think, to be honest, for the work plan that gets presented to council, I think you could take that off. Well, I think you would just take status off, because basically this is what we're hoping to achieve in the year, right? So some of them are, it's like, you know what I mean? So I would take that off for this purpose, and then as we revisit it through the year, we can maybe update the status. But I think for the purposes of going to council, I think it could be add that with either A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3 for reference, and then I'd take out status, because basically none of them are done. That's what we're hoping to achieve this year.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, Steph, do we need a we need a motion?
That the Housing Advisory Committee recommend that council approve the 2024 HAC work plan as presented and amended at its March 8, 2024 meeting.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Second. And I can't see everybody. Tim, thank you. All in favor? I think I can see everybody there. Yeah. Okay, approved. And I think Greg had to log off. He needed to get into his car, so he has stepped away, just to be noted. So hopefully that doesn't affect quorum. I think he said he would kind of call back in. We've got quorum. Okay, great. Okay, sorry, I've lost my place here in the agenda.
You're at housing targets report review.
Okay, 5.3 housing targets report review. I just wanted to mention, bring this back to remind us all that we did some great work a couple years ago. We did a housing.
I was very impressed when I was reminded.
Yeah, because I think it's just come up once or twice, either at one of our meetings or a council meeting. I thought, oh, we actually did this great work and it's here. So I just wanted to bring it to everybody's, refresh in our mind. There was work done. I think, Daniel, remind me, the housing needs assessment formally will be updated this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
We have to update it by December. Yeah.
Okay. And will that include housing targets like this? I can't remember what the provincial, or do you know off the top of your head if that is a requirement?
The province hasn't put out their new guidelines yet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just wanted to, again, this was more just a refresher. We did this work. I think it's still very valid. It would be, I think, wise of us, once the housing needs assessment's done, see what's in there. Once the OCP's kind of been right. So maybe towards the end of the year, it would be a nice thing maybe to bring this up again and update it or revise it. See if there's, or it might be redundant depending on what the housing needs assessment has. So I think it's just, I wanted to just highlight it because I think it got a little bit forgotten because it's a couple years old. So it's there. And it would be great, depending on kind of what the legislations are, it might be something we'd consider as a committee of recommending housing targets, because that is something that, if a community adopts housing targets, it becomes a very specific thing to aim towards and all of those. So that could be something we could consider, again, after all of the great work that's going to be happening this year in the reporting, that could be something we could sort of look to recommend to council in the future. So that was all. If anybody has any comments or thoughts, that was more of me just a reminder.
I was thinking maybe for the newer committee members, we should send a link to the actual housing needs report itself that was done in 2020, just so they've got it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe
the summary was excellent.
Yeah. Add that as a info
give them
item,
an idea about
in the minutes.
What? Yeah.
Okay. That's a good idea. Okay, so jump in if you do want to say anything else. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. 5.4, the rent bank update. So I did send a couple of inquiries to, and just as a reminder, so there was an announcement of additional funding for rent bank that came through my emails or something that I was aware of a month or two ago. And I think I sort of brought it up here just to see if anybody had thought of anything or known about it or anybody's following up on it. And it didn't sound like anybody was. So I inquired. There's a organization listed on the website. If you literally Google, I think, BC Rent Bank, there's ones very clearly for the Sunshine Coast. There's an organization very clearly for the North Shore. I contacted both of those. Neither of them cover Bowen Island, but they did direct me. There is a provincial level one, which I believe is an organization based out of Kamloops. And they basically cover everybody that isn't covered by another organization. So Bowen Island is covered by this. It's a program that is available to Bowen Islanders. And what I could do, I'm not sure the best way to get the information out there, but maybe, Steph, I'm not sure if we can, in the minutes, include it as an information item. I can put the link to the website. So if there is anybody out there on Bowen that thinks that they might benefit from this, which don't quote me on this because I don't know the exact details of the program, but the purpose of the program is to help people who might be in some financial need maintain their housing. So instead of if you're really struggling 1 month and you can't pay your rent, instead of being evicted and losing your housing and then having to find something else, the rent bank, I believe, either provides a loan or a grant, I don't know the details, to basically help you pay your rent that month or two to keep you in your housing. Because obviously it's much easier to provide a little bit of funding to keep somebody in their housing rather than have to assist them find other housing or put them in a shelter or something like that. So it's a fantastic program. It's just gotten some more funding. Again, I'm light on details, but it was more of I wanted to make everybody on Bowen aware that it is something that's out there if you are in need. And we will put in the minutes the link to the website that has essentially the eligibility and application and a link to the application. So you would go on there, make sure you met the eligibility requirements, and then there's a link to apply online. There's also email, phone numbers if the internet is not your friend. So I just wanted to basically put it out there to everybody that this is a service that's available and if it's of use to anybody. Allison, go ahead.
Is this the same? First of all, there's a typo in the agenda.
Oh,
it's rent bank.
Oh, yes. I did notice that too. Yeah.
I just noticed that. Is this the same program that they've been using to buy a couple of those co-op or those buildings that were going to be up for sale?
No, I think that's a totally different program. That might be the BC Builds, or it might be some other
Well, it
program.
wasn't BC Builds. It was some sort of BC Rent. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe
I'll look
Land
at that.
Bank, something like that. Yeah, no, it's
No,
definitely a
yeah.
different program.
Okay, so
This
different
one's,
program.
yeah, this
So
one's,
in thinking about getting the word out about this, we do that. Oh, there he is in his car, hopefully.
No driving.
No driving.
Not be driving. Thank you.
Turn your camera off so Steph won't be worried when you stop.
It's a,
oh dear.
We do those news from Bowen every news from BIM every once in a while. I wonder if a little article could go in there because it does get posted on the ferry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The news from
So,
BIM thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Steph, I'm not sure if you're the right person.
Writing an article. Is that...
So is it like I get the emails, like there's a weekly email, I think, from the municipality that kind of goes out as like a newsletter, and it has links to different
the news
tapping. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. So maybe we could see if I can liaise with you, Steph, and maybe with whoever at the Muni would be the right person, whether it's Sophie or somebody else.
Just a little paragraphs and the links. Yeah.
A little blurb and some links. Yeah, it would be great. I just would like to get the word out there that it's something out there that can help people. So yeah.
Can I just show you what I found and see if that's the right link so we can
yeah. Otherwise I do have it somewhere in an email. I would just have to quickly find it. Yeah.
So I found the eligibility page, which feels more useful than the home page is a bit can you see it?
Okay, so yes, eligibility. The link I have is, and yes, you've got rentbank.bc/eligibility. So I think that's one. And then the other link is literally the same, except instead of the word eligibility, it says apply, APPLY, and that's it. And that's the link to the application. Okay. And so, yeah, and I think you would have, so again, I can liaise and kind of write a little blurb, because I think Bowen's not listed there. You would have to click on, the general province one or something. There's maybe a couple of instructions to put there, but that's the right website. That's the right program. And we can figure out which page to link to. And like I say, I'm sure we can cut and paste some text to inform people what it's about. But yeah, just to read it very quickly for everybody, rent banks offer interest-free loans to help low to moderate income renters who are struggling to pay rent or essential utilities, including gas and hydro. The maximum loan amount is up to $3,500. Repayment terms are from 6 months to 36 months. Terms of agreement are set by the rent banks themselves, and it's a loan program. There you go. Applicants will need to demonstrate they have financial ability to repay or to pay regular monthly expenses and monthly loan repayments. And if eligible, we required to submit bank statements, proof of tenancy, and ID as part of the process. So, yeah, we'll work on that. I think that's a great action item to get the word out there. Okay, that was it for me on that. Next one we have 6.1 is other business. Is there anybody has anything? I don't know. I can't remember if it's been since our last meeting, Allison, and I don't know, Tim, if you attended. There was that like housing seminar for municipal councillors. Yeah, was there anything to share from that? Or I'm sorry if maybe you did it last meeting.
Well, I brought up the bit about the covenants. There was lots of good discussion and things about needs, and damn it, I haven't got my notes in front of me. And
no, that's okay.
I can't. No, we should write a little summary of what was there. There were lots of questions. I'm mixing it up with something else I was at too. So
that's okay. Maybe next meeting we could have a quick little update on it.
So I just was thumbing through my binder. Tim and Daniel, what did we had the referral about the piece of Crown land that went to council? What did council, we deferred it, or
it was referred to the strategic planning?
Right. Okay. Because I think in one of the things I gained from going to that housing seminar and talking to people and listening, I think it's very much because Lisa Helps was there and she was announcing the BC Builds program, because that was sort of announced at that conference, because really there hadn't been any details. And they, in reading through the BC Builds program and listening to everything and talking, they're looking for something that's going to be like, if we wanted that piece of crown land, we got to have a plan and we're going to build on it right away. It's not banking it. So they're looking for getting housing built. So they're looking for underused, like they, the example was a parking lot or something. And they had a couple of examples, but if you wanted to get that piece of crown land, it's not to bank it for the future. It was to, here's this piece of crown land. We're ready to go. We've got a plan. You lend us the money and we can get this built. So I think that's we just dropped that one.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's nice to have clarity on those
details. We've got two plans going already with area lot 1 and lot 3. So yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, thanks for that. That's good to get clarity. Okay.
So where are we with lot 3 and the loans and applications?
I have no update yet, but I have heard a rumor that BC Housing may be announcing soon. So there may be an announcement sometime soon, but yeah, we don't have it yet. But it's good that it sounds like it's coming soon rather than the last time it took 5 or 6 months. So although I guess actually we probably are at almost the 5-month mark. Anyways, so it should be, hopefully there'll be announcements one way or the other in the next week or two. So we'll be able to report back, and then other work on the lot 1 project is ongoing as well. So yeah. Any other new business from folks? Although, yeah, we have 3 more minutes in the scheduled time. So any other new business?
Have to fill it up.
We do not have to fill it up. This is it, right? Okay, so jump in if you do, but otherwise I'm going to look at calendars because I believe that our next meeting is April, it's in here somewhere, April 5. Yes. Okay, which is great because I think we shifted that a little bit, or maybe we didn't because I'm away. So I'm here. I'm here on the 5th. I'm away the following week. So hopefully that works for everybody's, and it should be in calendars. So April 5th. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. We've got it in the calendar. It's all set. We don't have to look at calendars and figure it out. It's great. It's all booked in. Okay, so if there's no further comments, we will wrap up 2 minutes early. Exciting. And we will see you all in about 4 weeks online.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Is that for you at Muni Hall today?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna get off YouTube and call me.